The Uninvited Guest. The cabin in the woods was meant to be our sanctuary, a place where my friend Emily and I could escape the chaos of our everyday lives. Nestled deep in the remote woods, the cabin promised tranquility and isolation, far from the prying eyes of the city. Little did we know that our idyllic getaway would soon become a nightmare beyond our wildest imagination. The drive to the cabin was an adventure in itself, winding through narrow, overgrown paths. Tall trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwined like skeletal fingers. The rustling leaves seemed to whisper secrets, and the occasional hoot of an owl sent shivers down my spine. As we approached the cabin, it stood alone in the clearing, a wooden structure weathered by time and isolation. Its windows were boarded up and the paint was peeling, but it had an eerie charm that beckoned to us. The sun was setting as we entered the cabin, casting long, haunting shadows across the creaking wooden floors. Dust motes danced in the fading light, and the air was thick with the scent of age. We settled in, our excitement for the weekend ahead quickly fading into unease. The isolation was stifling, and the cabin seemed to have a life of its own. The walls whispered secrets, and the floorboards groaned underfoot. That first night, Emily and I sat by the crackling fire, our nervous laughter the only sound in the cabin. We tried to shake off the sense of foreboding that had settled over us, but it clung to us like a second skin. As we prepared for bed, the wind outside howled like a mournful ghost, and the trees tapped at the windows, their gnarled branches casting eerie silhouettes on the walls. Lying in the darkness, I heard it, a soft, melodic humming that sent chills down my spine. I glanced at Emily, but she was fast asleep. The haunting tune seemed to draw me in, and I followed the sound down the creaking hallway. The humming led me to a locked door at the end of the corridor. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I couldn't resist. The door creaked open, and my heart leaped to my throat. Inside the room, an old music box spun in slow circles, its delicate tune hauntingly beautiful. The room was filled with shadows, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see a pale figure in a tattered dress, her eyes hollow and empty. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't respond, but her gaze pierced through me. She reached out a bony hand, and I recoiled in fear. I stumbled back and slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I returned to our room, shaken and terrified. I woke Emily, but when I tried to explain what I had seen, she dismissed it as a nightmare. I wished it were just a dream, but the music box continued to play its eerie tune. The next day, we explored the area around the cabin, hoping to shake off the sense of dread that had settled over us. We found an old graveyard hidden in the woods, the tombstones weathered and covered in moss. The dates on the stones were faded, but it was clear that this place had been abandoned for many years. As we continued to explore, we stumbled upon an old diary hidden beneath the roots of a gnarled tree. The diary belonged to a woman who had once lived in the cabin. Her entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with tales of a haunting presence in the woods and the cabin itself. Emily and I were unnerved, but we couldn't deny the connection between the diary and the figure I had seen the night before. The woman's words spoke of a malevolent entity that had taken hold of the cabin, a spirit that sought to lure unsuspecting visitors. We tried to leave, but the cabin seemed to have other plans. The windows were boarded up, and the doors refused to budge. Panic set in as we realized that we were trapped. That night, the figure appeared again, her eyes filled with malice. She reached out to me, her cold fingers brushing my cheek. I screamed, and the room filled with the echoes of my fear. As we huddled in the corner of the room, the cabin seemed to come alive, its walls closing in on us. The entity that had haunted us for days was a malevolent force that sought to keep us there forever. In our desperation, we turned to the diary, hoping to find a way to break the cabin's curse. The last entry offered a glimmer of hope, a ritual to banish the entity and escape the cabin. With trembling hands, we gathered the necessary items and performed the ritual as the cabin shuddered and groaned. The entity fought back, but our determination was stronger. As the first rays of dawn broke through the windows, the cabin began to disintegrate. The walls crumbled and the figure's wails filled the air. We fled the cabin just in time, the entity consumed by the rising sun. Emily and I watched in horror as the cabin vanished into a pile of rubble. The nightmare was over, but the memory of that haunting place would haunt us forever. We made our way back to civilization, the isolation of the woods, a distant memory. The cabin in the woods had been a nightmare beyond our wildest imagination, a place of darkness and malevolence that would forever be etched in our minds.